Now, the big surprise of this period is the degree to which the... Could we have the lights down slightly so we can see the slides a little bit better? The big surprise of this period is the degree to which the British, at the early part of this period, join in with this Renaissance. The tone of the period is indicated, best of all, I think, by one of my great heroes, Sir David Ochterlony, the British ambassador or resident. As you can see from this picture, Ochterlony is not dressed in the kind of tricorn hat and breeches that you might expect a company servant to be dressed in during this period. Instead, he's dressed in white quarter pajamas, he's got a hookah, a hubble-bubble, like somewhere on the Edgware Road today. It's not entirely clear what he's smoking. Judging by the slightly glazed look on his face, quite possibly not tobacco. And he's there with his dancing girls, a very suitable way of depicting a man who famously had no less than 13 Indian wives, each of whom had her own elephant. And every evening a wonderful procession would leave the British residency with Ochterlony in the lead, presumably wearing all this kind of kit, 13 wives following each in succession, and they'd do a loop around the Red Fort before returning, one presumes, to a kind of evening's entertainment like this. And best of all, I like the outraged Scottish ancestors peering down from the curtain rail, wondering what's happened to Ur Davy after a few years in the Indian sun. But there's a serious side to all this, and one that's very well worth recalling today. Because here is Ochterlony's tomb that he built for his chief wife, Mubarak Begum, in a garden, a Mughal garden that he named after her, Mubarak Bagh. And as you can see, this is the last of the great Mughal tombs. Here we are. It's destroyed now. It's destroyed in 1857, so no one knows about it. But this is the last of the great garden tombs of the Mughals in Delhi. And you have two octagonal side wings with Timurid ribbed domes. You have a great forest of minarets springing up all round. And in the middle, you have not a Mughal dome like the Taj, but an octagonal dome based on Brunelleschi's dome in Florence, rising to a cross at the very tip. So here in 1825, when this was built, no one in Delhi seems to have thought at all odd that there would be any contradiction between a building with 40 minarets and a cross on top. There are many other periods of history when this is true. I mean, it would have meant very little during the reign of the Umayyad caliphs in Cordoba, when Jewish, Muslim and Christian scholars worked together translating the classics. It would have meant very little to the baptized sultans of the Norman Sicily, Roger II with his Capella Palatina, which is a Western basilica with Byzantine mosaics and Islamic stalactite Murkhana ceilings. 18th century Delhi, Lucknow and Hyderabad is another of these periods when Islam and Christianity is not just not clashing, it's actually fusing, it's actually inspiring each other, they're cross-fertilizing each other. And Ochterlony was by no means alone. This is my wife's ancestor, William Fraser, shown as a slightly snotty young Scottish aristocrat before he was sent out to be Ochterlony's assistant. But look what happens when he arrives and meets Ochterlony. Here he is only 3 years later. And already from the nose, he's still got his Scottish hat on, but from the nose down, he's going thoroughly Mughal. And here is, watch the facial hair in this succession of pictures. Here he is by 1835. And this sort of effect, again, to us it's very comic, and indeed it is very comic in many ways. But there is a serious side to this. Fraser was not just sort of dressing up for our pleasure. He was engaged in a theological discussion with Shah Abdul Aziz, who's one of the grandsons of Shah Waliullah, who's one of the senior ulama of the period. He's a patron of Ghalib. When he's killed, Ghalib writes, "I lost again a second father." He's a extremely discerning patron of Indian miniature painting. His own commissions, the Fraser album, is regarded as the last great monument of Mughal painting or company school painting, however you classify it. While his collection of older Mughal painting is the core of the Kevorkian album, which now forms the core of the Metropolitan Museum in New York collection and is regarded as the highest, one of the highest moments of Indian painting. So this is not some guy sort of swaggering in, sort of, impregnating the kind of women of North India. This is a scholar with a deep understanding of the culture, with a deep understanding of the languages and the theology. Shah Abdul Aziz says he never met any other non-Muslim who understood so well the subtleties of Islamic thought as William Fraser. So these are interesting things going on. Again, the sort of thing which breaks every stereotype that one reads in the ignorant media today about Islam and Christianity. East is West. But what, in a sense, lies at the heart of this book is the question of why we move from this world, where it was considered fine to build buildings with minarets and crosses on the same, in immediate proximity to each other, in as late as 1820s, to the hatreds and violence and intense and bloody uprising and bloodshed that you get only 30 years later, in the late 1850s. Why do you move from one world where apparently you have a fascinating cohabitation and cross-fertilization to the bloodshed of the uprising only a little later? And I think there's two very simple reasons for that. One is the simple fact of the rise of British power and the very speed of the rise of British power. Again, sort of Victorian history books talk about the British slowly rolling out over India over a period of 300 years and sort of defeating everybody. The reality is very different. The British were precarious perchers on the shore of India as late as the late 18th century, as late as the 1790s. In the 1760s, Tipu Sultan's troops were better armed with more modern weaponry than the sepoys of the company. 1764, at the Battle of Polilur, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan defeat the company so catastrophically that I think a quarter of the British troops in India are captured and led off in captivity. The outskirts of Madras are burnt. But this changes, and it changes particularly with the arrival of one man and a new policy. A new conservative government draws up in the 1790s what is, in a sense, a project for a new British century. And the man who's sent out to implicate it, the Paul Wolfowitz of the late 18th century, is Lord Wellesley, the elder brother of the Duke of Wellington. And Wellesley is sent out with a very specific agenda to answer not to the directors of the company in London, but to the foreign policy of Downing Street. He's their appointment. And Wellesley disdains these commercial interests, as he calls them, and wants instead to raise British power to a new peak of prestige. He goes out with a very deliberate plan. He's going to take out, first of all, those cheese-eating surrender monkeys, the French, and then he's going to go against any Islamic power that dares to take on the hyperpower. It all sounds rather familiar. So 1798, the last French troops in India are disarmed in Hyderabad. 1799, in alliance with the Hyderabadis, the East India Company takes out, finally, Tipu Sultan. 1803, again, only 5 years after Wellesley's arrived, there is the big campaign. The Marathas, who are this confederacy of horse-born warriors who've swarmed out from the area above Bombay all over central and northern India, are defeated by the British in 5 brilliant victories by the young Duke of Wellington at his first command. The Battle of Assaye, and finally in 1803, the Battle of Delhi. Leaving the British suddenly transformed from being a coastal power, quaking within the walls of Madras, Bombay and Calcutta, to being the sole hyperpower with unlimited power throughout the entire peninsula of India. The only army that can take them on in any form after this is the Sikhs, and they're taken out in the 1840s. But in a matter of only 5 years, the British have made a dramatic transformation, and this changes their attitude. Up to this point, the British, particularly from about the 1780s, have been intermarrying and have been studying the culture of India.